Welcome to It Takes Guts. From Ukrainian Refugee to Kefir CEO, I'm here with Julie Smolyansky. We practiced this. And I cannot tell you how much effort it has taken to get here today.
Yes, it was a journey. It was a journey, but we made it.
We made it. We woke up at 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, and we've been traveling since, and we're so happy to be here.
We could not be more thrilled that we made it to the stage, and it was all worth it. We made it.
So thank you for being here. It's my pleasure. First of all, my name is Jessica Yellin. I'm a longtime political correspondent. I was the chief White House correspondent at CNN, and now I run a brand on Instagram called News Not Noise. And Julie is the CEO of Lifeway Foods. She's also has an amazing resume. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and we're going to then talk about her product, Kefir, her roots in Ukraine, how this came to America, and what it has to do with the microbiome, living healthy lives today, and embracing immigrants and traditions from around the world.
Thank you. And I am so honored to be sitting on stage being interviewed by Jessica Yellin. Like, holy cow. If you don't know, she traveled with Obama, with the Bushes, with Clinton, and she's interviewed the most important people. So this is such a treat for me and for all of us. So thank you so much for doing this.
That's so kind of you. That is her generosity. So Julie was the youngest female CEO of a publicly traded U.S. company in history. She is Ukrainian American. She has grown her family's Kefir company into a global powerhouse with more than $130 million in revenue last year. She's also the mother of two, the supporter of a lot of gender equity and women's causes, and evangelist for healthy living. Julie is essentially now working to improve lives by helping consumers understand health and make better nutrition choices. We're going to get into all of this, but I really want to first start with your story, because you were the youngest female CEO of a publicly traded company in America, and that must have been challenging. What was it like for you when you got that job?
It was devastating. You know, my father started the business in 1986, and he'd been running it for 11 years, growing it, building the business, and suddenly he had a sudden heart attack at the age of 55, and overnight I became the CEO. And that night when he passed away, you know, all the friends come gather at the spouse's house, and his best friend, 2 feet away from me, said, "There's no way a 27-year-old girl could run this company. That's it. Sell all of your stock. It's over." And it was devastating to me to hear that. I, you know, used that statement as fuel to my fire, and decided that he was wrong and that failure was not an option, and I would do everything that I possibly could to make sure that the business not just continued but thrived, because all that my parents sacrificed, risked, all the hard work they put in, and I'm sure we'll get into the full story, but they worked so hard to get us to that point, and I was not going to let it fail. So I went into the office that night at 2 in the morning and secured all the secret files, and, you know, did all the urgent security stuff, and the rest is history. I never looked back, and just decided that this was my calling. This was my contribution to the world, and to be of service to my team, the business, our community. There's nothing better than, you know, helping people feel better through food and lifestyle choices. So yeah, I mean, it was hard, and I find myself very often in rooms of only men, mostly older white men, and I've learned to, you know, go head to head with them and like just find my own skill set and lean into what I'm really good at, and there's something to be said for that.
I think it's one of the only family-owned massive private food brands in America. So you've really achieved an enormous amount I want to get into. But really, let's go back to the beginning for a minute, because I remember drinking kefir when I was a little kid. And I always liked it. I didn't know that it had all these properties. So what is kefir?
Kefir is a 2,000-year-old ancient healing food. It's got properties that are known to be medicinal and very beneficial to our health. So it originates from the Caucasus Mountains, which is a region in the former Soviet Union, Ukraine and Russia. And in this region, the people who consumed it regularly lived past 100 years of age. And they attributed their longevity to their consumption of kefir. And it's like they intuitively knew in their gut, no pun intended, that kefir was good for them. They, this recipe was really held by our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, and the recipe was passed down generation to generation, and it survived through storytelling, much like we're doing today, through storytelling, word of mouth, and families sharing it with each other. And it was known to increase your immune system, support your digestive system. They believed it could prevent tuberculosis back in the day, and a whole range of really great benefits that they just intuitively felt. And it wasn't until 1908 when Dr. Elie Metchnikoff did the first round of studies on probiotics, fermented milks, and the impact on wellness and health. And he won a Nobel Prize for this work, and he found that kefir, fermented milks, actually contributed to our overall general health. And since that time, the amount of research and science that's been conducted, and so much even just in the last few years with COVID, it's remarkable what we're just learning about bacteria, probiotics, microflora, the microbiome, good bacteria. These are all things that we're just starting to learn. And it's crazy because, as I said, it's a 2,000-year-old bacteria that survived, and we think even it goes back 4,000 years. Archaeologists found mummies that were buried with kefir cultures around them, leftover after, all of this, they would bury their dead with probiotics and kefir, and they thought that it would bring on the afterlife. So the fact that here we are, it lasted, and I think it stood the test of time, and. So it's a fermented dairy. It's made by inoculating milk, and this bacteria ferments, and it consumes the lactose as its food source. So it's a live, living bacteria. And I always think about this DNA that this bacteria is transmitting and how it works on our body, and the symbiotic relationship between gut, bacteria, our health, and all the other things that I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah.
You sort of allude to it, there's this folklore around it. It's 4,000 years old, it was buried with the dead. Didn't Cleopatra use it? Would you share some of the folklore?
Yes. Yeah. It was said that Cleopatra bathed in it. She thought it made her skin beautiful, and it does. There's a benefit to, beauty comes inside out, but also, just applying it and bathing in it is really great. Lactic acid, it creates a lactic acid that is beneficial to skin. Marco Polo wrote about it in his travels. Genghis Khan wrote about it. It's even written about in the Bible. So there's a lot of stories around kefir, and eventually there was a princess that was kidnapped and held for ransom for these kefir cultures.
Whoa.
Yeah, really? It was almost a war over it.
Oh my God. But it's so interesting because it's this, you think about every culture has a version of this. There's kombucha. There must be an
Lassi
Asian
in India,
right.
Matcha. There's a version of superfoods in every culture. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kefir's ours.
And in the old country, just briefly, how would people consume it?
Yeah, so this was a staple in the former Soviet Union and Eastern European countries. Kefir was a staple. It was every day people consumed it as part of their daily life, a staple. A lunch would typically be a quart of kefir and a loaf of bread. So this was in the Cold War times. This was a typical lunch. And while it was really humble, there was so much health that was being gained from that consumption of kefir. And like I said, our ancestors, our grandmothers really knew what they were talking about.
Right, they knew. So let's go back to that pre-Cold War era, because it was your parents who brought kefir here. Tell us a little bit about, where did your parents live? What is their immigrant story?
Yeah, I mean, so my parents were in their 20s and they were growing up in the Cold War. My great-grandparents were murdered in the Holocaust, during the Holocaust. And my grandmother survived, and then my father ultimately was born. And my father and mother grew up in communism and in Ukraine. Yeah, I was born in Kiev. We're from Ukraine. And, he watched, just felt very stifled, suppressed. He had these aspirations of an entrepreneurial life, and it was impossible in the Soviet Union. That just didn't exist. And so he was really frustrated. He one time got Led Zeppelin and Beatles albums underground in the black market. And that was contraband. He would be arrested for owning a Beatles album. And that got him really angry. He's like, I can't even listen to music. And he, when I was born, the day I was born, he made a promise to me to get me out of the Soviet Union. And a year later, he worked on this plan. And a year, I turned 1, and we left the Soviet Union. We defected. And went to Italy for 3 months. We lived in exile while we waited for our paperwork to come through to be allowed to enter the United States. And an organization called HIAS, which is Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which was born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. They are renowned for their refugee resettlement programs. They're really the experts on resettlement. And they met us at O'Hare in 1976. I was 1. My parents were in their late 20s at that point, middle and late 20s. And we came with $116 and no friends, no language. There were no other Soviets there. There were no, anybody to help us with language. And we were the first of 48 families that were settled in Chicago. So very much trailblazers and risk takers. And they didn't know what was on the other side of the Iron Curtain. They didn't know what life was like. They were completely closed off from the world, isolated. There was no Google. They didn't know what was behind that door and that wall. And but they went anyway, and they had faith. And yeah, I'm really fortunate. My mother learned English watching General Hospital. I grew up with Luke and Laura. And so that was kind of the beginning. And my dad was an engineer, so he went through the Chicago alleys and was able to find broken electronics, and he would repair them and then sell them. And then that was how the first few days of our life in America was. And eventually my mother saw this intuitive sense to feed your community. She said, wow, America has so much food. She'd never seen so much food in her life, but it was different than her Slavic food. And so she opened up the first Russian deli in Chicago, and that deli became town square for all new Soviets that were immigrating. And everybody, they got off O'Hare, and then they went to my mom's store, and they learned about life in America. How do you rent an apartment? Where do you send your kids to school? How do you get a car? And a pierogi.
All around the table.
All of it. So yeah, it really, they built a community around feeding people and food. And that's what started our entry into the food industry. And I think it's because of scarcity. They grew up without food. My mother talks about, sometime being so hungry that she thought she was gonna die. It was just, and we were able to leave because of this, I think it was Nixon that signed this Grains for People. To reduce the famine in the Soviet Union, we were traded for...
You were traded for food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes.
Go figure.
So your family at this point has this market that's vibrant in Chicago, but it's local to Chicago. How did they make the leap from that into bringing kefir into America?
Yeah, so at that point, my mom became a total badass. She was doing deals with all international food companies, and she became an importer and distributor of Eastern European food. So everywhere that Russian delis were opening up in Brighton Beach, New York, in San Francisco, LA, Chicago, she became a supplier for all sorts of Slavic food. And so they were in Germany at a food buying show in 1985, and my dad bought 3 bottles of kefir in the store there, because it's well known throughout Europe, but non-existent in the United States at the time. And he opened up the bottle and drank it right outside of the grocery store and said, "Oh, it reminds me of my childhood. America has everything, but it doesn't have kefir." And my mom said, "Well, you're an engineer. Why don't you make the machines, build out the factory, make kefir, and I'll sell it through my distribution system?" And he said, "Brilliant." And 6 months later, without a business plan, without a fancy logo, no cards, nothing, he started making kefir out of our basement in the suburbs of Skokie. And I was the first guinea pig. I tried all the first batches. I vividly remember being in the basement, and he would be like, "Try this, try this, try this." And like the smell of like fermented dairy, very prominent in my life.
Yeah, you don't still make it at home.
No, not anymore. We bring it home.
There's a piece of this story you told me before. This is based on a bacteria. You have to get the original ancient bacteria. How did you get this strain of bacteria into America?
Yeah, so through a care package, in Russian we call it basilka, through a care package from my grandmother in like these little children's tights, warm wool tights that they made in the Soviet Union that didn't exist in the United States. My parents asked my grandmother to share the culture, and she tuck it into the tights, and then they shipped over the tights to me.
She smuggled it in pantyhose, basically.
I know, don't tell Putin, though.
I know, right? Well, there is this connection back to Russia because, to fast forward a little bit, the company started growing, and then there's some story about Reagan bringing your kefir to Gorbachev?
Yes, this is so cool. So, so Lifeway was founded in '86, and at the same time, if you remember what was happening politically, Reagan and Gorbachev were meeting to discuss the peace process and to tear down the wall and reduce nuclear arms and all of that. And the media, the news media, was absolutely fascinated with all things Soviet, and so they had heard that there was this crazy Russian immigrant. Well, we say back in the day, really Ukrainian, but back in the day, no one understood Ukraine versus Russia, so we just made it easy and said, we should just continue to say Ukraine. But so we get a call from the White House, and they say Reagan's on his way to meet with Gorbachev for the Moscow Peace Summit. We heard that you were making a product native to the Soviet Union. Could you send us some? So we sent a case over to the White House, and Reagan brought a few bottles over to Gorbachev, and he tried to express, like, you know, all of your countrymen are leaving. Look at what we're doing in America with your immigrants, with your people. You know, you're losing brain trust. Tear down this wall. That was part of the story. And I had the opportunity to meet Gorbachev a few years ago, and he remembered, and he knew of our kefir. Yes, and he knew about it. He gave me the biggest hug. It was so cool. It was definitely full circle. But yeah, I mean, and so that actually, all of that attention, all of the media that was around the company and my father at the time only propelled us further. And then somebody said to him, well, he needed to expand, and they said, well, you need to go public. And he had no idea what that meant. So he went to the local Skokie Public Library and looked it up, and then he wrote his own business plan and took the company public in 1988.
Wow.
Yeah.
It really has boomed, and there's not many privately owned food companies like yours. Why do you think it's grown so well? Why do you think it's caught on?
Well, storytelling, first of all, that continued storytelling. It stood the test of time because it works too. It's a really good quality, very lots of science behind it, and I think that the science only helps people make good choices when they learn about the science, when they learn how good it is, how beneficial it is for your health, how easy it is. You know, it's really accessible. It's not something that's so unattainable. It's available for everyone at this point at every grocery store in the country. So I think that those are some of the reasons that we have had success. But also marketing. I think, you know, the key is marketing to everything. You have to start with a great product, but marketing is why we survived.
And you must have felt pressure to sell this to some big conglomerate.
I mean, so Danone does own 20% of our business. They're investors, Group Danone. But I think that, you know, we are really dedicated to building the business, growing it, producing the highest quality products, you know, serving our communities, serving our team, all the stakeholders. And I mean, sure, you could always sell, and that's an option, of course, but we have so much that we're still doing. We have so many things that we want to still do that are helpful to our valuation. And you know, right now, that's all I can just think about is how much it feels like it's day one. It doesn't feel like we've been doing it for 30 plus years, 35 plus years. It feels, every day to me feels like we're a startup and we're just starting. And it's exciting to see the momentum and that the awareness is finally there. Like, we were the first to write probiotics on our bottles, and at the time people didn't even know what probiotics were. They were like, we want the kefir that's not probiotic. What did you change? What did you do? We're like, no, this is what you want probiotics. Right. And we really had to educate people. You know, at the time, even yogurt was new. Yogurt was like unknown, 4 SKUs that was like diet food. And so the movement around food in general has come really far, but especially around fermented foods, dairy, you know, probiotics, friendly bacteria. I mean, I remember my dad said, never talk about bacteria. Americans don't understand bacteria. Just tell them it's good. It's a high protein, high calcium. Don't talk about bacteria.
Wow.
So we've really come far in how we talk about the benefits of kefir and food in general.
Well, it's really in the conversation right now, and people are learning so much, not about, I mean, this talks about, you know, it takes guts, which refers to you and your story, but also the microbiome. So what does kefir do for your microbiome?
Yeah, so all of the good bacteria, in our gut, we have good and bad bacteria. And you get sick when there's more bad bacteria than good bacteria. So the good bacteria crowds out that bad bacteria. And it affects everything from, like I said, digestion, immunity, and now we're learning mental health too, which is so exciting. To me, it's like one of the most exciting things because it truly does make you feel better. And so the gut is considered now to be the primary brain. And the mind and the gut communicate through the vagus nerve. And when you put in all of that good bacteria, it sends messages, neurotransmitters through the vagus nerve. And that's where we are learning that kefir can help reduce stress, depression, and anxiety. So it's really exciting to me to know that with really small steps, small choices, we can manipulate and alter our mental health. And that's really powerful. I think you know, when I see stories about, and just a few weeks ago, I think the CDC said that 1 in 3 girls is incredibly sad, has contemplated suicide. to the point where it, limits their activities for 2 weeks or more. That's really frightening to me. 1 in 3 girls, and this isn't just because of COVID. I know it's really easy to blame COVID, but these numbers were already skyrocketing even before COVID. So, we have a major crisis happening across the world, not just in the United States. And there's a lot of reasons for the mental health crisis, but knowing that there are small choices, that it's not all hope is not lost, that we can actually improve people's day-to-day lives with small choices I can't think of anything better to be, working towards. Yeah, so it's really exciting to see all this new research coming out. And during COVID, I think more science was conducted around bacteria, microbiome, kefir, and its impact. I mean, researchers out of Israel found that the consumption of kefir reduced the getting COVID. Like, you could actually prevent COVID from...
Say that again?
So you could prevent COVID from drinking kefir.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's the immune system and the response of all the good bacteria that can fight, bad things coming into your body, the impact of COVID or flus or general cold, and even autism, ADHD, all sorts of allergies, addiction. We're learning even, that kefir has a role to play in the reduction of eating disorders. This is all new research, it's the new frontier. I'm excited to see even what we don't know about it. Yeah.
Isn't there a story about somebody who had cancer drinking kefir, and what's the story?
Yeah, so usually when you go through a round of chemo, it's really hard to keep any food down, to digest anything, and you pretty much lose your appetite. So we've been getting calls from people over the years who, through word of mouth, they hear that kefir is something that they're able to consume when they're going through chemo. And a lot of times it's the only food source that people can consume, and it might not save your life, it might not get you out of that, but it does provide a nutritious, food source, protein, calcium, vitamins, all the probiotics, while somebody is going through a very devastating treatment. So yeah, we have a lot of supporters who have experienced it, and we're just happy that we're able to provide some sort of nutrition, and in that moment help people feel a little bit better. When you're hungry, you just want something to eat, and you want to be able to keep it down, and that's really powerful.
So for folks who don't know, what are the ways people can consume or use kefir other than just drinking it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just wrote a cookbook a few years ago called The Kefir Cookbook to help share all the ways that you can consume and use it and how versatile it is. I love making salad dressings with it, or baking with it. Marinating my meats in it is great. Smoothies, of course, are natural. So there's a lot of different ways. And this was not something that was done, nobody cooked with it in the Soviet Union. That wasn't a thing. And there were no flavors either. It was always just plain.
What flavors are there now?
100, every flavor under the sun. We actually just launched a birthday cake to support Pride. Oh. So that's coming in June, and we launched guava. So that's an exciting new flavor. But we have a lot of flavors, and that was an innovation that came when my dad went to one of his first sales meetings. His first pitches was a big grocery store chain in Chicago, and they said, Mike, this is great, but Americans want sugar and they want flavors.
Do you remember his first flavor?
Strawberry. He said, put sugar in it and put strawberries in it, then it'll sell. And that was a really great example of collaborating with a grocer to kind of bring to the market something new. So it's really cool that after 2,000 years, this idea to put a fruit flavor in it was an innovation, and that's what helped Americans start drinking it.
And you said now you make popsicles with it, you make pancakes with it. Does it lose its active elements?
Yeah, I mean, when you heat it up, it does hurt it destroys the bacteria, but it's still just a really great substitute for, recipes, like instead of sour cream or butter or milk or, heavy cream. It's a great substitute in cooking, and there's a lot of home chefs I know, a lot of foodies, so that's fun. But there's a ton of things you can do that doesn't require it to be cooked, so it's both.
We've talked so much about, relearning what's good for you. And I think about, in our lifetime, there was the diet craze in the 70s or 80s when everything had to be no fat or low fat, right? And then there was the pasta diet where you're going to lose weight only by eating pasta and baked potatoes. We get so much wrong.
Many.
Do you have sort of keys to healthy living and healthy eating these days that you really have learned work?
To me, it's eat a little bit of everything. I think that the elimination diet, eliminating things from your diet, is where we end up going wrong. I think it becomes, forbidden. You feel like you're not able to enjoy whatever it is that you're eliminating. I think that's the biggest pitfall to how we think about food, our bodies, diets. So balanced, a little bit of everything, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of fat, a little bit of all of it, and then you don't feel like you're losing out on anything. Have the pizza, have the brownie, but also have the kale salad. Drink the kefir. It doesn't have to be this really hard thing that we do. Food should bring us joy. I think about what can you bring into your diet, not take away, and then you don't feel like you're deprived. But yeah, I think also we have this fat phobia. It's a cultural context. We should be, and it's great to see this body positivity movement happening. But I think that, this is a construct that's created by companies to help sell more product, to make us feel bad about ourselves that we need to do this or that or the other thing, so that we buy more of the fat-free cookies or the various whatever the new trend is on dieting. And really, it's really more about going back to what our grandmothers really knew. I think our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers were nice. They knew what they were talking about. And I think it goes back to, eating these ancient foods from all different cultures, having a wide variety of food options, diversity of all nutrients is probably, I think, the best way. And it's great to see that there's more options, that healthy eating is something that we're all talking about. There's, the Obama White House you covered, the Let's Move and all of the food campaigns and bringing in healthier food into school systems is definitely a positive. In Chicago, my hometown, there are communities that are total food deserts. I'm sure we all know. You can't get an apple in some of these communities, and it's devastating to see Whole Foods close down in Inglewood, which is a community that's incredibly under-resourced, one of those food deserts. Aside from chips and sodas, there's not much else there. And I think about how small things, small choices improve our health. In the same way, those other choices take away from our health. And how it makes our body feel. It's not one thing too, right? It's a whole lifestyle choice. So how you move your body, how you rest your body, how you talk to yourself, the food, it all works together. And we know that when you're making good choices in one area of your life, you're probably making good choices in other areas of your life. And these are things that we find, I think it is the key to mental health. It's, the act of self-care is actively making choices that are positive for your body, for your health, for your wellness. It's a global kind of choice that you have to make, and it's actually you're able to improve your life.
And that's literal, also in terms of your impact on the world. I think we should point out your company also is very environmentally friendly. How do you don't have a huge footprint to begin with, but how do you source your products?
Yeah, we work with a lot of local farmers. So like for our organic, we use all organic farms, over 1,800 farms that we work with, support local family farms.
And they provide
milk, yeah, organic milk for us. We work with Amish farms and try to buy as many of our ingredients locally. We also were leaders in the renewable energy credits, so we have analyzed our energy usage and have basically we operate carbon neutral, so that all of the energy that we use, we put green energy back on the grid. So we've been doing that for about 20 years now.
Amazing.
So really way ahead of the curve. I think it's important to all of us. What are we leaving to our kids, to our grandkids, if we're not, working as manufacturers to lead, to, make things better, to make things more environmentally friendly. It's never going to be perfect, but we try to, strive to better manufacturing process. And, we use constantly working with suppliers on packaging to get biodegradable packaging, make from start to finish. So there's small things we can do, and that's the goal, basically, to keep pushing to more environmentally friendly options.
This is what happens when women run companies. Let's talk for a moment about some of your work outside the company, because you have a very philanthropic footprint, including in Ukraine. Obviously, you have this deep connection to Ukraine. How did you engage when the war started?
Yeah, this was unbelievable. I mean, immediately we watched the first bomb go down. I still have family members that are in Ukraine, and most of my team still has family members and friends that are in Ukraine and in Russia. And so it's been really, really painful for everyone in our community, at our company, in our family. My cousins didn't even have passports. They had no desire to ever leave their home country. My cousin didn't even drive. She had no idea. She had no desire. She loved her country, and she had no plan to leave. And suddenly, overnight, her and her children, they're in a bunker. They're living in a bunker for 5 days. They're all sick. And she, because of Telegram, was able to see that this war isn't ending. They thought they were just going to hide for a few days. And she was like, a professional. Her husband's a working professional. They were living their lives, building their family. And then this started out of the blue. They were completely caught off guard. And she ended up getting on a train to Poland. And this wasn't like just, hey, let's go on a train. She didn't drive, so she had to get herself to the train station. Shoved into the train, just like the horror stories of the Holocaust. It's like so similar. Shoved in, no light, no water, no food. They couldn't turn on their phones because the light would reflect, and they would get potentially bombed. So no access, and they didn't know what they were going towards. They didn't know what was behind, what was ahead of them, and terrified, just the trauma that they went through. Anyways, they got to Poland, and eventually I sponsored her, and she just came with her kids in December, and we have settled her in Chicago. But there's hundreds and thousands of stories like that. And there's already, I think, over 1,000 kids have been killed in this war. I mean, it's crazy that in 2023 this is still happening. But within 10 days, it's always like what can you do with that pain? And for us, it was an opportunity to mobilize and organize and bring community together and have an outlet for this pain. And so we partnered up with 73 of the top chefs of Chicago, and we had a fundraiser. We sold 1,500 tickets in 10 days. We raised over $700,000 to World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres, who was just on, I saw speaking earlier. And, we're out there on the border and in Ukraine feeding people. It's the basics. It goes back to what do you need to survive, and it always goes back to food, shelter, clothing. So, yeah, we immediately mobilized, raised money, continue to try to keep attention to the people and the stories and humanize them. And then we developed this nice charity relief bottle that a portion of proceeds goes to support refugees and Ukrainian relief efforts. Hopefully we'll get $1 million raised. That would be great. And I hope that when the war is over, that we'll be in a place where we could help with rebuilding efforts. I can see a Lifeway Ukraine being built one day, or partnering up with a local organization on the ground. And my vision is to have all of the children who were murdered from this war, all of their names on a plaque that we can remember them forever, and I'd like to make them honorary CEOs forever, so that their memory will live on, and that we'll always let the kids and the youth in the world guide us to the next step, the next right thing. Yeah, so I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but it's hard to think, all that my father kind of predicted was going to happen, and the reason why he made that promise on the day I was born. He was really smart, and he knew what was happening and what was ahead, and he, unfortunately, everything that his worst nightmare came true. And it's really hard to believe that the world order could be disrupted like this, and such devastation could be transpiring by and this kind of trauma for generations to come, is going to continue on. And so what can I do? Where's my role in anything in this world? And what can I do? I can keep telling the story and keep people's hearts and minds with our counterparts across the ocean, and make sure that we can continue to support democracy.
Beautiful. I have some more questions, but we have a few more minutes left, and I want to say if anybody here has questions, please feel free to stand up to the mic, and I'll take your question, or you can raise your hands. There are not so many of us. I'm going to ask one more question because, do you have one? Yes.
Yeah, I just appreciate you both so much for coming here. And I was at a NASA panel with all these amazing female astronauts, and I just at the last minute saw this panel, and I ran over here. And Jessica,
Thank you.
an epidemiologist friend, recommended you right before the pandemic.
That's cool.
And I feel like you've narrated
That's so sweet.
the
Thank you.
news for me, and thank you so much for everything you do for making news sane. And
That's so
the
sweet.
mental health things, I've heard you speak to that too. I mean, you both are dealing with such heavy issues. And I've worked in refugee services for a long time, worked on a lot of human rights, and I know that especially can just weigh so heavy on people, when you're trying to maintain your own mental health while you're addressing these things. And I know you've kind of talked about this a lot, but I'm just kind of wondering, when you get into really sticky places, trying to get to the next level, are there things that are your go-tos for kind of keeping going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for both of us. I go back to self-care. It always goes back to self-care. And it's not a check the box, I did it and I'm good. It's an ongoing life commitment, life journey. And it's everything. It's going outside for a walk, moving your body 20 minutes a day, we know increases your dopamine. Drinking kefir increases your dopamine. Carving out time to read a book, or whatever it is that brings you joy. It's something different for everybody. for me, it's reading, it's working out. I mean, even when I'm traveling, I try to make sure to have time built into my schedule so that I could still get a workout in. I find it incredibly important. And I think it's these small lifestyle choices that really do make a huge impact. Therapy, you know, having mentors, people that help me ground myself and just are a sounding board, or, you know, can validate what I'm going through. All of those things are really helpful. My kids, you know, spending time with my children, there's nothing better for me as, you know, medicine than to spend some time with my loved ones, friends, building community, giving all the pain some purpose. I think at the end of the day, we keep going because there's work to be done and people are relying on us. And of course, you can't take care of the world if you don't have your own oxygen mask on. So, you know, put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help everyone else. I've definitely felt burnout. I've definitely questioned if I can keep going. And that's when you really know, like, okay, I need to take a break. So, and I have an incredible team that fills in when I do need that break.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, because you clearly lead with compassion.
Yes.
And you're such a impressive person who's pushed through a lot.
Thanks.
What advice do you have to other young leaders?
Again, put on your own oxygen mask. You know, take care of yourself. You can't, you know, follow your dreams if you're not taking care of yourself. And then the other thing is just don't give up. Never give up. Just keep going. Don't stop. And yeah, just believe in yourself. You know, no one else is going to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. Fake it till you make it. You know, that one worked for me too.
It's true.
You know, lean into what you're good at. You know, I learned really early on what I was good at and what I wasn't, and I hired for what I didn't know and leaned into what I knew. You know, those things really took me far. Surround yourself with great people. You know, just have incredible role models and mentors, even if you don't know them. I mean, I too follow Jessica, and was so grateful for all of her sharing of her content and like unpacking what was happening in all of the last many years. And you know, it's you don't necessarily have to know those people to feel connected to them and to, you know, use them as an example or role model. Oprah, I love Oprah. I feel like she raised me, you know, and I don't know her, but just, you know, having her on the screen, it was always, you know, helpful. But yeah, those little things. But
that's great.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Well, I think that this has been a gift for me because I've gotten to know you through this. As you can see, she's so impressive.
Oh, thanks.
I think your daughter's here. It must feel so good to know this is your mom.
So nice that you're here. Yeah, my daughter Leah is here, and that makes it easier to, you know, travel or whatever, is if I can have a family member with me. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is like being away from loved ones when you're doing this kind of work. And yeah, I'm grateful for my family.
Well, thank you for what you do for our guts and for the guts you've put out into the world and what you represent, not just as a CEO, a woman CEO, but as just a caring steward of our planet and one another.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you and to share the stage and talk to you. Honestly, it's like, I don't think my dad would believe it. I think he would be like, what? You're being interviewed by Jessica Yellin? Do you know who she interviewed? Do you know where she's gone and traveled? And yeah, I mean, she got to almost live on Air Force One with all of the presidents. I mean, I am blown away by your story.
That's
so
great. Thank you.
Equally impressive.
Well, where can people find you on social and stuff?
So I'm at Julie Smolyansky on Instagram, at Lifeway Kefir on Instagram, and that's pretty much the best way to stay in touch.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'm Jessica Yellin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.